Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak in English. I hope that's okay.
I think my phone just came.
I do speak French if we have problems, but I think it's just easier for me to speak in English. So, as mentioned, my name is Gabrielle Harris, and I work in China with Planète Finance. I'd like to thank the LH Forum, the Positive Economy Forum, for inviting me to come all the way from China. It's a great honor. So I will talk about my experience of energy transition. I have been working on a rural program, and that rural program was deploying renewable energy via microfinance. However, before I start on that subject, I will have a more macro part. The more macro part is to go into a little bit the changes that have been occurring in China in the last 2 years in terms of energy transition. So the big driver, what is the big driver in China for energy transition? It's pollution. China wants to be seen as a good global citizen. It wants to make its contribution to the reduction of greenhouse gases. And it has very suddenly, just in the last 2 years, become a world leader in planning new renewable energy capacity. It should be remembered that much of the motivation for those recent changes are because China is facing pollution problems of unprecedented proportion. And we should also keep in perspective that although there have been many, many changes, it is still true that China's current carbon dioxide emission level is the equivalent of the emission levels of the US plus Europe. Just yesterday, a report came out talking about how in 2013, the greenhouse gases actually rose 2.3%. So what we face today in the way of pollution is the legacy of the economic miracle of China, which was mainly going on from 1978 to 2012 or 2011. As you can imagine, with these kinds of official reports, and I would tell you these are official numbers, so they might even be higher, but these are official numbers. You can imagine that the Chinese citizens feel that they can hardly eat, breathe, or drink safely. Dissatisfaction has reached a very high level, and many talented Chinese people are leaving China because they fear for the health of their children. Pollution can be a flashpoint for citizen unrest in China. Naturally, there are many kinds of pollution in China. Many sources of pollution, too many to go into today. But this slide can show us what is the main source of air pollution, the hottest environmental topic of the moment, and it is from coal-based heating and power generation. The Chinese government has never really had any doubt that climate change is real, unlike in many jurisdictions and administrations. The main issue for the Chinese government was which phases of economic development it should do first. And so the previous decade from 2000 to 2010 was devoted to keeping a high rate of steady GDP growth. And that's despite a massive earthquake in the beginning of the administration and the global financial crisis at the other end of the administration's term. That previous decade built up a huge cash reserve, estimated at 3.3 trillion in 2012. A cash reserve which will be needed for the cleanup of polluted soils and water and for the investment in the transition to cleaner power generation and heating. It will also be needed for dealing with climate change events and mitigation. For sure, that is coming. The current government of President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Li Keqiang, which is scheduled to last for the next 8 years or so, is very focused on party discipline and the fostering of a China dream, which seeks to exclude both dirty politicians and dirty air. If supervision remains close, there could be chances for new pollution to be avoided. This slide shows us some of the real actions that have been undertaken against dual problems of pollution and carbon dioxide, methane emissions in China. Concerning the last point on the list, China knows that Southeast Asia will be among the worst hit places in the world, and that China is itself in danger of becoming a refuge of last resort for a large population in Asia. And that's why they have been concentrating on this topic. They were writing papers in China way before the advent of Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth. The big goals at the moment are to cap the share of coal in China's energy mix at 65% by the year 2017. Equally, they want to reduce these micro emissions, these terrible micro particles that have been affecting our air by 15 to 25% in the most highly industrialized areas. At the moment, investment in cleaner growth is coming from the central annual budget allocations distributed by the Ministry of Finance. 5 large state-owned utility enterprises are administered by China's highest executive power, the State Council. These are huge quasi-corporate structures with many subsidiaries, some of which are listed in Hong Kong. With a business face, their mandate is strictly government, and government is by no means against profit. So, will there be any room for financial innovation in this sector that is dominated by government? Probably the areas with the greatest potential for financial innovation will be distributed energy users, and these might include housing developers, and also industrial plants that want to upgrade their energy efficiency. There is an international finance corporation project which has, since 2006, been doing a kind of loan guarantee program, which has been very effective in allowing small and medium enterprises to get financing from banks who normally wouldn't want to lend to them. And they claim that they have wiped out about 19 million tons of greenhouse gases, so from 2006 to 2013. China used to guard very jealously its what they call strategic industries, and energy is definitely a strategic industry. But we have seen precedents where heavily guarded industries have allowed participation, somewhat pushed by multilateral agreements such as the WTO. Progress tends to take a long time because there are lots of trials on the way, a lot of trials, a lot of testing technology. I think I'm going to have to move on. So I think I have to zoom to the micro level to keep my time. Okay, so I have been working on a project in Gansu province in China, which was working with farmers to see if they would borrow, I'll go to slide 17. See if they would borrow, where they take on an obligation to invest in. So it wasn't something that would give it an immediate, I'm just going through these slides so that you can see. So this is our project, and these were some of the people in the project. I'm going to move on. This is a scene. Okay, these were some of the things we were trying to achieve as we were designing our project. All around the world, it's very difficult for microfinance to help people invest in a good rather than something that can produce more income immediately. But in China, we found that indeed we could persuade people, but there were conditions. Farmers had to understand that the biogas system was bringing more than just a cooking facility, for instance. They had to get used to the idea, even though they'd been treated all their lives as illiterate farmers, they had to suddenly come to grips with a new image of themselves that they could handle a biogas digester. This was something, a very big jump for them, because they had been seen as illiterate farmers all their lives. So Planet Finance worked with local energy technicians to make picture explanations for the users, and to look for farmers who seemed to be leaders, who seemed to understand very quickly, and they could encourage all the others. Above all, we had to change the way that existing trainings were going on. So why am I talking about this project? Because if you don't foster understanding, then it's really hard to do transitions in energy. So classroom training was essential. No more classroom training, participatory training. People will only change over to new technologies when they're comfortable with them. If they don't become comfortable, they'll revert and no shift will occur. These are some of the questions that we were trying to ask ourselves. For our point of view, we were just making a small pilot. It's inevitable that local government will continue to be the driver of renewable energy education and adoption through subsidy programs in China, and that they will be the ones deploying expertise. But the tick-the-box government trainings that leave farmers only half understanding what they have heard do not work well. These are some of the things we've understood, which I've just mentioned. I'm going to move on. So what I also want to close with is that the other model, which doesn't look so successful, is that China has invested in something like 44 million biogas digesters, of which it's reported there are perhaps 5 million biogas digesters that are really functioning properly. Government needs more civil society players working alongside to improve trainings, and to get more private solution providers to offer more sophisticated, attractive technology products. In the meantime, animal husbandry, especially cattle, is the #1 way, helping people raise cattle is the #1 way to accelerate poverty alleviation. The only problem is that no one seems to be thinking around the fact that these animals are all releasing a great deal of methane if you don't have a biogas digester. So actually they're helping the poor, but they're really not helping the climate and the planet. When policy contemplates all the possible interactions and unintended consequences, when policy works well for the users who become willing to change how they get their energy, when local officials are incentivized to promote sustainability, and the private commercial sector is monetarily incentivized to innovate distributed energy systems, China will be able to transition from the old coal-dominated energy economy, and it will drive positive change. Thank you.